Stephen Miller is the reason why Kristi Noem was fired. Sure, her infidelity, her corruption, and whatever her face keeps doing were certainly reasons why Donald Trump decided to drop her, but in the end, it was the civil war between Noem and Miller that sealed her fate, and for now, Miller seems to have come out on top. But if Kristi Noem gets her way, and she's trying with everything she has, that may not last much longer. And this comes at a moment when Stephen Miller himself is now facing a public call to be fired. There are growing demands to remove him as the Trump administration appears to be tearing apart at the seams. The internal power struggles inside the MAGA movement are getting worse by the day. And Stephen Miller, the man who arguably designed the most disastrous part of Donald Trump's agenda, his deportation plan, his illegal deportation plan, could very well be the next one forced to answer for it. You can already tell that Stephen is worried about it. Not just because of what Kristi Noem is allegedly trying to leak to make sure he gets fired, but also because of the way he's been scrambling to perform for Donald Trump, juggling and dancing to stay in his good graces, just like we saw earlier, before getting into these new calls for Miller's removal.
But what you're seeing right now, Sean, is a military under President Trump's leadership that's not fighting politically correct, that isn't fighting with its hands tied behind its back. One of the reasons I fear, Sean, that some people in this country lost faith in the military and the capacity to use that military to defend us is because we had a woke Pentagon, because we had a military who at the very highest levels, not the warfighters, was forced to fight a less than full fight.
Oh, dance like a good little monkey, Stephen. Dance for Donald. Dance. Dance for the dear leader. You're doing such a great job. Stephen Miller will always go on Fox, look like a tomato, scream, and have the veins popping out of his ghostly face. But this time, it's especially bad because Stephen Miller is scared right now. Sure, he knocked down the one domino he needed when it came to people standing in the way of his plans to run this entire administration, and that was Kristi Noem. But he's still facing calls to be held accountable. Donald Trump's immigration agenda remains deeply unpopular, and Stephen Miller is still the one running that widely disliked show. So it wouldn't be surprising that he still feels like someone is breathing down his neck, someone trying to mess with him, someone trying to set him up. And that's exactly what MAGA does. There is no loyalty. Donald Trump demands absolute loyalty from everyone else, but the truth is there's no loyalty inside MAGA. That's why, after she was fired, Kristi Noem immediately started leaking about problems she supposedly had inside the White House, issues we had never heard about before, and someone inside the White House responded. That's where we should start before getting to the firing threat itself, because it paints the full picture of the situation between Noem and Miller. Ice Barbie is making a desperate attempt to spin her own firing. Kristi Noem is now claiming that she had problems with Donald Trump after he fired her in a Truth Social post. The soon-to-be former Homeland Security Secretary is making a last-ditch effort to save her reputation after Trump removed her from the position. Noem reportedly had complaints about the Trump White House. The right-wing outlet, The Daily Caller, reported that a government official told them Noem had informed Trump and his White House that she wasn't receiving the support she needed. Another White House official, who could that possibly be, pushed back on Noem's claim, saying it was laughable that she was trying to blame someone else for problems she created herself. According to that official, the issues that led to Noem's removal were the result of her own misconduct, not a lack of support from the White House. Let's remember that one of those misconducts involved Kristi Noem labeling Alex Prey and Renee Good as domestic terrorists, falsely claiming they would be executed in the streets, and doing everything she could to spin things for Trump, which ultimately blew up in her face. And she claimed that it was Stephen Miller who instructed her to do it. She tried to shift the blame. Now she's saying, well, the White House didn't support me, it was their fault. And then a senior White House official responds, no, the blame clearly falls on Kristi Noem. What's clearly happening here is that she and Stephen Miller are leaking different versions of the same story, a story in which both of them look like criminals who should be charged at the International Criminal Court and buried under a prison. Let's be honest, they're trying to shift the blame because Stephen Miller knows what may be coming next, and that's accountability. He could be the next one in line. And Republican Senator Thom Tillis is already calling for it, saying, Stephen, it's time for you to be fired.
Do you think Stephen Miller should go?
Oh, of course I do. I think Stephen Miller is one of the. Not only does Stephen really want to just paint a picture, he's not worried about substance, he's more worried about form, but I also think that he has an outsized influence over the operations of the cabinet. And I believe we've got qualified cabinet members there that sometimes are doing less than what they want to because of his direction and his outsized influence. He's a big problem in this administration. He has been from the beginning. But Noem is a Senate-confirmed cabinet member. She should have been independent. I believe that Mark Wayne will be independent. I believe that Mark Wayne will be driven by data. He'll leverage law enforcement resources, expertise, people like Tom Holman to get things right. And if he doesn't, we'd hold him accountable. But I have a lot of confidence in my friend, and I'm looking forward to him getting this department under control so that Republicans can seize an issue that helped us get elected, strong on the border, strong on deportation, strong on the rule of law.
Thom Tillis is right that Stephen Miller should be fired. And when I spoke with Gavin Newsom during his book tour, he said something similar. Kristi Noem is the scapegoat. The real rot inside the Department of Homeland Security is the man behind the entire deportation agenda, and that man is Stephen Miller. We all know it. And honestly, it's good to see Thom Tillis, who annoys me in a lot of ways, publicly calling for Stephen Miller to be fired and essentially putting that threat out in the open. Because right now, Donald Trump may be more susceptible to influence than ever. Take Lindsey Graham, for example. He's been bragging publicly about going to Benjamin Netanyahu and teaching him all the little tricks for pushing Trump toward a war with Iran. At this point, many people believe Trump might be the first U.S. president, at least during Netanyahu's time in power, reckless enough to actually stumble into that conflict. The reality is that Trump is constantly being influenced by the people around him. During the day, he practically falls asleep in meetings, and at night, he posts nonsense on Truth Social. In the hours in between, he's being pushed and pulled by powerful figures, whether that's tech oligarchs like Elon Musk, Sam Altman, or Larry Ellison, or political actors inside and outside the administration. But here's why Stephen Miller matters so much. He's the one who arguably has the most direct control over Trump. And right now, a lot of people are fighting for that position of influence. Trump often looks like a puppet in many ways. Some say he's influenced heavily by foreign leaders, others say by wealthy tech figures, but inside the administration, no one pulls the strings quite like Stephen Miller. Now, Kristi Noem is trying to push a different narrative that Miller has failed and that he's actually the one hurting Trump politically. Trump clearly recognized that Noem and the Department of Homeland Security had become a political problem for him, which is why she was pushed out. But if the argument becomes that the rot goes deeper, if both Kristi Noem and Thom Tillis are pointing the finger at Miller, then the next question becomes obvious. Shouldn't Stephen Miller be the next one shown the door? Personally, I think so. And it's possible Trump may start considering that. But there's something about this that really frustrates me. Someone like Thom Tillis suddenly decides to go after Stephen Miller, but he's not running for re-election anymore. Once politicians no longer have to worry about voters, suddenly they find their courage. We see this pattern again and again. A Republican breaks ranks, the media praises them as a maverick, but what are they actually doing? Because at the end of the day, this is still the same Thom Tillis who will turn around and support Donald Trump while saying, well, I'm not really criticizing Mr. Trump. We still love dear leader Trump. That said, I do enjoy the internal conflict this creates. The infighting inside Trump's circle is fascinating, and in that same interview, Tillis continued going after Stephen Miller. That's important, and it's something worth discussing further, along with taking a closer look at Lindsey Graham's role in all of this. So stick around after this clip because there's a lot more to unpack. The internal fights may be messy, but politically, they matter.
One of your points of contention with Secretary Noem was her handling of the aftermath of those fatal ICE shootings of 2 American citizens, specifically how she jumped to conclusions before their deaths had been investigated, calling them domestic terrorists. I do want to play for you how Senator Mullen reacted just hours after Alex Preddy was shot and killed.
A deranged individual that came in to cause max damage with a loaded pistol with an extra mag that was completely loaded, was shot and killed. Now, how much more does this got to go on before the Democrat leaders there take responsibility for their words?
So obviously there's no evidence that Alex Preddy was deranged or that he came to cause maximum damage with a loaded pistol. He had a license to carry, or that any Democratic leader was responsible for this tragedy. Does that give you any pause?
It gives me pause that you had people like Stephen Miller calling the shots that actually I believe that maybe Kristi Noem acted on. It was Stephen Miller that was talking about a terrorist brandishing a gun. It was Stephen Miller who said it was the position of the United States that we should go after Greenland. It's Stephen Miller that's been repeatedly responsible for embarrassments for the President of the United States by acting too quickly, speaking first and thinking later. I think if I don't think Mark Wayne goes to the podium and repeats something that Stephen Miller says. I think Stephen Miller's demonstrated he too is out of his depth, and I think Mark Wayne will learn from that.
Again, Tom Tillis, you're not a tough guy just because you jump in at the last minute and say a few things about Stephen Miller or Donald Trump. This is something I see Republicans do all the time. They always find one person in the administration they can criticize so they can signal, oh, look, I'm different. I'm breaking away from the pack. And the person you see getting that treatment a lot lately, especially in right-wing media, is Lindsey Graham. And trust me, nobody enjoys mocking Lindsey Graham more than I do. Lady Lindsey, the fence-sitter that he is, the aggressive war hawk that he is. But you constantly see Republicans saying things like this. I recently saw a clip from someone who used to work for the Daily Wire. I don't know if you know Brett Cooper, but she joked that the only way to stop war is to find Lindsey Graham a boyfriend in Israel, or give him some iced tea on a porch and a nice toy back in South Carolina. Sure, it's funny to joke about Lindsey Graham being a war hawk. Everyone already knows that. But you're missing the point. Who exactly is Lindsey Graham convincing to go to war? If Lindsey Graham is pushing for war and people actually go to war because of it, then who is he ultimately persuading? He's persuading Donald Trump. So what you're really doing is avoiding criticism of Trump himself. If you believe Stephen Miller should be fired because he's creating chaos and destruction in this country, then what you're really saying is that Donald Trump is a bad president, but you're not willing to say that out loud. Instead, you pretend you're offering some kind of meaningful critique from a morally superior position. But you're not, Tom Tillis. And neither are all these Republican influencers who think they're doing something brave by criticizing Trump. It's nonsense. I'm not going to accept that framing. It's contradictory, and we need to keep holding them accountable. And on this show, we're absolutely going to keep doing exactly that. That said, I do have to admit it's pretty entertaining watching Kristi Noem try to get Stephen Miller fired while Tom Tillis is also calling for him to be fired, and everyone inside the movement is leaking against each other and getting distracted. That part is good. It gives us a little bit of hope. We're going to enjoy the chaos a little. I'll try to bring some humor into it when I can. And if you want to support that, you can always hit the subscribe button and leave a like on the video. If you made it all the way to the end, drop a blue heart in the comments. Keep fighting, everyone. Don't let them silence you. And until next time, we'll see you soon.